Hi folks, welcome to Mad About Madeira. And I just want to know, this is just a little intro at the very beginning to let you know that this video is going to be in three parts. I thought about something afterwards. After I finished the bulk of the video, I thought about something, so I'm going to add that in, and you're going to see that at the tail end of the video. So after the bulk of the video is finished, which I think went on for like about 28 minutes, there is something else I'm going to say at the very end. So I just wanted to let you know, so if you're tuning in and you look up at the time and say, oh my goodness, he's going to be talking for another 35 minutes or something like that, that you're aware that this is three parts. So I'm just letting you know, but stick around to the end. Watch the video, but then stick around to the end because it's some personal family information that I found out, and I would just like to share it with you guys, okay? So stay tuned for the next part of this video, which is the bulk of the video, and then at the very end, I added another piece, okay? See you then. So hi again, subscribers. Welcome to Mad About Madeira. We're still here. That's the first thing. We're still here in the United States. We have not made it to Madeiras yet. As a matter of fact, we have not even started the processes yet because I have a couple of hurdles. We've got jobs that are US based, and these jobs may not allow us to work overseas. They may. Well, my wife's, her job would give her a letter stating that she can work overseas. But then you have the tax situation and her being W-2, and most likely you need to be a contractor worker and so forth. So we're having to try to figure out how we're going to get around this. Trying to see if we can, at least I am, aggressively looking for something that I can do. Well, we work remotely, but that I can do remotely anywhere in the world with the blessing of a company, or something that is more or less 1099 related, where I'm my own boss and I wouldn't even have to worry about that anymore. So we're still here, unfortunately. Was trying to get out of here by October, by the time the new school year started, since we have a toddler, so you could start school there. But it looks like we may be here a little bit longer. And that makes me very sad because I really don't want to stay here any longer. But anyway, that's another story. So what I'm doing right now is I'm doing a video to fill in. I know we haven't done a video in a while, and I don't want to just let it just sit here, the channel just sit there without new content. So I'm just gonna fill it in with something right now. I was hoping that we would have been talking right now about the process. We're getting our D7 visa. We're heading to Madeira, Portugal. I thought that's what we'd have been talking about right now, but unfortunately we're not. So still trying to work out some kinks so we can get this process started, so that we can check everything off, that we would have no problems with this process. Of course, some people have mentioned to me that since I've mentioned the fact that I have Jewish ancestry via Portugal or Spain, I think it's Portugal though, through one of my ancestors from Madeira, I should go that route. But when you go that route, then you're talking about, people are saying it's a year's wait now, a year or two. So can't wait that long. So gonna have to try to go with the D7 visa and see how that basically works out. Well, what I wanted to talk about here was something I touched on in the very first video. I think I may have hinted at it, but I did not elaborate or go into depth with it. So here's what I basically want to talk about. It's the fact that I mentioned in that first video, the one that says why we're moving, well, hopefully I'll put it up here, why we're moving to Madeira. And it seems to me that at an academic level, it is, put it this way, I think a lot of Madeirans, I think a lot of people from Portugal are aware that there are Portuguese communities, or I guess you can say Portuguese, who are spread out in places like Hawaii, places like California, places like in the Midwest, because there was a Presbyterian church connection there, of the United States, the Midwest of the United States. I think That's known. What to me, in my estimation, from where I sit, what's lesser known are the Portuguese that went to the Caribbean region. I think people are aware that Portugal and Brazil have a long history with one another, so people are aware that you mention Brazil, you tend to just think Portuguese. You know that the Portuguese were there. You know that they colonized Brazil. For those who are knowledgeable about this, you would know that Portuguese is a language also spoken in Brazil. A lot of people are also aware that there are a lot of Venezuelans who are in Madeira, I believe, in Portugal. But the Venezuelans seem that they were a later group that started showing up in places like Portugal. And Venezuela is also a little bit of an anomaly. It's somewhat weird because they were colonized, that area of the world was colonized by the Spanish. That there are Venezuelans now who are associated with with Portugal is somewhat, at least odd to me, because you would think that a lot of Venezuelans would be more associated with Spain, the country that colonized that area. Whereas you could figure in Madeira and Portugal, you'll find a lot of Brazilians because, their country was colonized by Portugal. So Venezuela is a little bit off, but it's a large country, relatively large, I should say, relatively large population. But I think in the shadows, or lesser known, are the Portuguese who settled or immigrated to those small, tiny Caribbean islands. So, as I said before, Portugal never colonized anything in the Caribbean region. They never did. They never colonized Cuba. They never colonized Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, Haiti. Portugal was nowhere to be found in the Caribbean. Okay? But yet, when you go to the British Caribbean especially, you find a lot of people with Portuguese last names, especially in places like Trinidad, places like Guyana, and even little tiny St. Kitts and Nevis, where my mother and father were both born, respectively, and where I was actually raised. Again, I was not born in St. Kitts or Nevis. My father's from St. Kitts, my mother's from Nevis. I was born in the Virgin Islands in St. Thomas. But yet, even on those tiny little islands, they're Portuguese. There's a Portuguese legacy there. I think on an academic level, thanks to the work of, I think her name is Joan de Freitas. I may be wrong. Pereira, I think it is. I don't, or Ferreira. I think that was her name. But on an academic level, there is information there that details this immigration of Madeirans, especially, who came to the Caribbean region. But on the streets, I don't think the knowledge is really there. And that is one of the things that I spoke about to some degree in that first video. And I think one of the reasons for that is because a lot of these immigrants who came to the Caribbean from Madeira starting in about the early mid 1800s, going all the way into the 1900s actually. I want to say by the middle of the 1800s, there were at least 10,000 Madeirans who left. 10,000. I know I've seen numbers as low as 6,000, 5,000, but I'm talking about from the 1800s going forward. I want to say there were at least 10,000, maybe even more. That's a lot of people that left Madeira and traveled to the Caribbean region. But you don't hear stories of many of these people who immigrated, even though they were going on contract. It was a 7-year contract that they were a part of, indentured servants, that after 7 years, you could then turn around after your contract was up and you could head back home to your homeland. But we don't hear many stories of these people ever moving back. Because after 7 years, you figure what's going to happen. And most of these people were young and able-bodied. So when they came, a lot of them probably didn't have any children. They may have left mom and dad back home, uncles and so forth, but they didn't have any children. Not to say none of them did, but they probably didn't have any children. So when they came to these Caribbean islands, these Caribbean countries, a lot of them probably started new families, or they came with their husbands, their wives, and just came over and just decided to start new families. Because think about it, it's not like the world we live in today where you can leave and hop on a plane and be back home in 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. You're talking about a boat that's sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, probably takes a few days, comes all the way over, and now you're there working, doing whatever you have to do. It was not like, hey, next year I think I'm going to take a 2-week vacation and head on back home to see mom and dad back in Madeira. That was not the case. So most of these people came over, like my ancestors, they came over, they never went back. So before you know it, you're now assimilating into a new culture. You're assimilating, and when I say a new culture, now you're in a position where you now have to learn English because that was the language of the Caribbean islands that you came to. And then you have your children, and then your children are going to English schools, and before you know it, they're assimilating, and then there's no reason. So then Madeira becomes somewhat of a distant memory. And so the information is just about Madeira, about your homeland, is somewhat cut off. And it's not like you had your children. It's like, hey, let's go home to visit grandma. Let's hop on a plane. Let's plan a vacation next year to do that. It wasn't that kind of world. So these people came over and most likely just ended up staying. And after 2 or 3 generations, Madeira just faded away, where there's no memory or not much information passed down. Perhaps it was more, that information was probably more there with the people that came over as husband and wife, had their children, so you had that influence from both parents, as opposed to people like me, where my great ancestor came over, my great ancestor came over, both of them. One of them married someone from a neighboring island, St. Bartholomew, or St. Bart's, and the other one married someone who was local from the island of Nevis. So now you have a parent, you have one parent from Portugal and another parent who's local, or another parent from another Caribbean island. So not much was probably passed down after that, because definitely I sure did not know anything about any of this until I was well into my adult life. It was the first time I heard about a place called Madeira, and that I am associated with it through an ancestral connection. So on the streets, it seems like it's not much that goes on that a lot of people are aware of in terms of these immigration, in terms of the immigration that took place. So here's what goes on. I grew up in school, or go to school as a young boy, or in St. Kitts where I was raised. I'm growing up, and there are Portuguese names around. Now, of course, I didn't know there were Portuguese names back then. I didn't know anything about Portugal as a little boy. But I remember growing up, and it's like, hey, I'm going to go up to the store. My grandma sent me to the store to go up to the freights. Now, that's how they say it there in the English form, but it's de freitas. But by the time I got to an English-speaking place, it became freights. So it'd be like, hey, go up to freights and buy some bread. Not realizing that these freights are descendants. I would walk in there and I would see these very light-skinned people and everything, and they would be like, go to buy some bread from them. But they were known as freights, but their name comes from de freitas. Then I had an uncle who was married to a woman, and she was also very, very, very light-skinned, and her last name, or her mother's or father's last name, was De La Coudre. I hope I'm saying that right, but De La Coudre. That was also a Portuguese name. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. Then I went to school with people with names like De Castro, De Costa. There were people with names like Ferreira, Pereira. I remember from in St. Kitts, Pereira. All these are Portuguese names. Again, I didn't know at that time they were Portuguese names. But now that I've become an adult, and especially being on Facebook, I will have friends from Guyana because my wife is from there. I will have friends from St. Vincent. I will have friends from Trinidad. And I will look up and I'm seeing all these Portuguese surnames of some of my friends. And some of them are not even aware. They just woke up one day and just had that last name. And they're not really aware of the fact that those surnames are actually Portuguese. So they're not quite aware. So then when I start looking into it and I start trying to find out, and I'll ask some of them, it's like, oh, well, you'd hear them say something like, yeah, I heard my great-grandfather was from Portugal, or I heard this about Portugal and whatever. But it's not anything that they're jumping through hoops or flipping cartwheels or anything like that. They just basically heard that something about Portugal in their family. It's similar to what happened to me as a little boy growing up. While I did not know about Madeira, I wasn't terribly familiar with Portugal. It was mentioned somewhere along the line when I was growing up. One of my uncles said something along the line like, "Hey, you know, Mama's people are from, they're from Portugal." And when we say people, we don't mean like your immediate, but it's like she's descended from Portuguese people. And again, as a little boy, I didn't know what a Portugal was. I didn't know where Portugal was. I had never heard about it, at least until I got into school. I had never known anything about Portugal. But here I am on a tiny British island out in the middle of the Caribbean, what, 2,800, 3,000 miles away from Portugal. And I'm being told that my grandmother, who's raising me, this fair skinned, this, well, practically white woman, that woman is a descendant of people from Portugal. Again, it didn't make a lot of sense to me when I was younger, but now I'm an adult. Now I understand. So when I look into this, again, at an academic level, the information is there. But on the streets of Madeira, and the streets of Portugal, on the streets of Trinidad or Guyana, there's not much talk about this. In Guyana especially, they are aware of the Portuguese heritage, the Portuguese legacy in their country. They're aware. But it's like people just go about their normal business, that there's not this big desire to learn about Portugal or push to go to Portugal or push to have better relations with Portugal or anything along that line. Now, I think in recent years, in a place like Guyana, where a lot of these Madeiran immigrants went to, their last president, I think, declared a particular day Portuguese Day. And I think there has been some other gestures where I think the mayor of some city in Guyana, I think Georgetown, made some sort of I don't know, some sort of a gesture where there was like an exchange of something there. So there is some awareness. But what I'm curious about, or what I just can't seem to understand, I am surprised that these Caribbean nations where you have a good chunk of your population, a sizable enough of your population that have Portuguese heritage, why these islands in the Caribbean have not developed better diplomatic relations with Portugal. For example, in St. Kitts and Nevis, it's like, okay, yeah, there are Portuguese people here, or people of Portuguese descent, but there's no big outreach to Portugal to say, hey, listen, let's explore this connection. Let's go ahead and have better diplomatic relations, perhaps relationships where it's like, well, because a third of our population or an eighth of our population are of Portuguese descent, what about if we have things like student exchange, where our best and brightest can leave from here and go to your University of Lisbon, or it could be something like visa-free travel to a place like Portugal, where it could be like they might, people who come from those islands that have a sizable Portuguese descended population can go to Portugal on a particular type of visa because of that. So if I was going to be a leader of St. Kitts and Nevis or Antigua or St. Vincent, where you have a bit of your population that are of Portuguese descent, I think that would have been something I would have like called up Portugal and say, hey, listen, you know what? I don't know if you know about this little history here, but we are connected to you guys. We have quite a bit of people here with surnames from Portugal. De Santos, Vera, Silveira, De Costa, De Jesus, so many different names I've heard. I see them all over Facebook all the time in my friends list. Or sometimes I go to some pages pertaining to Guyana, and when I look at the respondents or people who are responding, I'm looking at all these Portuguese names. I'm like, wow, that's quite a bit of people, So what I did, believe it or not, when I came back from Madeira, I went to the first place I went was to a Guyanese page that I'm a part of that has about 100,000 members. And I jumped on that page and I put up the pictures of my trip and I talk because again my wife is from Guyana, so that's why I'm a part of the page. So I go to the page, I put up like a little trip report, how our trip was, that we went to this place known as Madeira, and then I put up photos and talked about it. The response that I got just blew me away. Do you know how many people came into that page, into that status that I had? Oh, my great great grandmother was from Madeira. Oh yes, I heard that we were from Madeira. I heard Madeira, Madeira, Madeira. That's all I kept hearing. And I would look at the names. I see Gomes, Gomes. I don't know. I hope I'm saying that right. And I'll see all these Portuguese descended names to the point where there's also another page that I was not even familiar with, but it's a page that's Guyana based, it's Guyana centric, but it's dedicated to Portuguese heritage. And I was like, wow. So it goes on out there, but I'm still surprised that a place like Guyana has not gone forward and gone to Portugal and reached out to them to say, hey, let's explore a wider relationship. Not like the two countries are enemies, but it's like, hey, listen, hey, see us over here, Guyana, see us over here, Trinidad, like these small little tiny islands over here. Well, a good chunk of your population made it over here to these Caribbean islands and left a lasting legacy that we still find in the names. And we would like if you can just sit at a table with us and let's explore a better relationship, a wider relationship, where we can get to know one another a little bit better and we can talk about this some more. And perhaps in doing so, we can start rekindling bringing those links back again and exploring these links. And that we could start looking into family that came from over there. Because I think, like, again, I am what? I said I'm a great great grandchild, just like my wife is a great great grandchild. So you're talking about a difference of about over 100 years, taking all of that into account, right? So over those 100 years, a lot has been lost. A lot has not been passed down. I didn't know. My wife was even worse. She did not even know anything about anything to do with a Portuguese connection. I heard it in whispers growing up. No one specified that it was Madeira. But in the year 2007, when my grandmother passed away, my paternal grandmother who raised me, who is of Portuguese descent, when she passed away in 2007 on my birthday, that's when I started to look at her legacy. Growing up with her, I wasn't paying much attention to it. But when she passed away, I wanted to know more about who she was, where she came from, like who was her, because I didn't know anything about her father. I didn't know anything about her mother. They all passed away long before I was born. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know anything about her grandmother, who was actually the woman from Madeira. I didn't know anything about her. So it's only when she passed away, it's when I first heard, as I started looking and snooping around, trying to find out. That's when I found out. And the first time I heard, hey, your grandmother's grandmother was from Madeira. I was like, Madeira? What? Where's Madeira? Where's that? What's that? Oh, Madeira is an island off the coast of Portugal. It's part of Portugal. I'm like, oh, that's where that comes in. But again, I'm just thinking that was just a rarity, that's just her. Until I started finding out that this was commonplace with a lot of people in St. Kitts, a lot of people in Nevis. And then I found out a lot more in Guyana, in Trinidad, in those places. So it would be very nice if these islands, these Caribbean countries would look into this and reach out to Portugal and explore this. And perhaps if something like that happened, it might have been easier for me to make it to a place like Portugal. Wouldn't have to be going through all of this. Or there could be some specialized visa for people like us. Could say, hey, you know what? Now, of course, proving that I am of Portuguese descent, it's not that difficult, mind you. But it might be difficult for some other people because I went ahead and did my DNA test. It shows that I do have Portuguese ancestry as much as 10%. 10 or 15, well, somewhere around there. So it does show that I have that. That's one thing. Then I was able to find the records of my great-grandfather, whose name was John de Guire, and his mother was a Maria de Jesus from Madeira. I mean, you're not going to go to St. Kitts and find someone with the name de Jesus and not think that they have some sort of Portuguese or maybe even Spanish connection. But that's where she came from. So in the oral history from 2007, I heard she was from Madeira. That was some oral history that came down to me. It was not until just the other day I actually found a record of her. Not a record that she was born in Madeira, but the record of her existence in St. Kitts. And I saw where she married a John de Guire, so I knew about him, or I heard about him growing up as a child also, even though I never met him, but I did because my grandmother's maiden name was de Guire. So when I look at the record, I see John de Guire Jr., the child of John de Guire Sr. and Maria de Jesus. John de Guire, Frenchman, Maria de Jesus, a woman from Madeira. So that information was confirmed by me seeing that record. So it would be great. It would be nice for something like that to happen. So this is just me just saying it out there. Maybe some Portuguese official might be watching this video. Maybe the president might see it. And like, yeah, you know what? I like what that guy is saying. You know, we should probably go ahead and start doing that. So wouldn't it be nice to have like Portuguese people being able to travel to Caribbean destinations and going down there to St. Kitts and Nevis and enjoying the beaches, and or going to Trinidad and enjoying Carnival and just exchanging, you know, and just that would be so cool. So that's just a thought that's been going through my mind. So I decided to just create a video about it. So you guys can talk about it. Tell me what you think about it, because I know there have been some of you who've come into the comment section and you've mentioned things like, and I've seen it, where I've seen when I put this up on Facebook, I've seen where people come in and they're like, oh yes, you know, I had a great-great-grandfather that went to Demerara and that's all I know. So it's like, it's on both sides. It's like they went to Demerara, which is Guyana or British Guyana back then. They went to Demerara and that's all we know. Never came back. We just know that he went there or she went there, never came back. And then on the flip side, it's like we know they arrived over here, but information wasn't passed on to let us know where they were connected back in Madeira. Some families were lucky to have that. I didn't. My wife did. Well, my wife was a little bit more fortunate because she knew she was told her great-great-grandfather's name, and his name was Jose Teixeira Doraya. The good thing about her situation is that he went through the proper channels and you were able to find his record, his passport record, where he traveled, and it shows his destination from Madeira to Demerara. So we were able to find him that way. On my side, I have not been that lucky because one of my ancestors is a Maria de Jesus. That's like looking for Mary Smith in England. There's a lot of Maria de Jesus. Trying to find out which one she is, that's a difficulty. On my mother's side, it was an Emmanuel de Costa. He's more of a mystery. He changed his name and did all sorts of crazy things. So kind of like really threw us off the scent. So it's very hard to track down who he is and all of that stuff. So a little bit difficult there. So I'm still trying to do some research and trying to put some pieces together to make sense of all of this. But again, I was just doing this video just so to fill in some spots that you guys are not that you're beating down my door and saying that you want content, but I just didn't want the channel to just be sitting here without a video for quite a few weeks. So I decided to put this one together, and I want to thank you if you were able to just listen to me just go off in tangents and just, not really a rant, but just going on, just talking and so forth. So I thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. I would love to hear your thoughts about this. And again, if the president of Portugal happens to be looking in, or his brother or his sister, his wife or whatever, get it to his ears. Let him, let him see this video. I want to hear what he would say or what he would think about something like this. Exploring diplomatic relations. Hey, beaches, they're beautiful beaches in the Caribbean, I know Portugal has some, but the Caribbean, we have some beautiful beaches. And St. Kitts looks a lot like Madeira. So I'm talking to you, Mr. President of Portugal. So it would be nice if you're able to take a look at that and look into it. Flatter me, it would be nice. I mean, I'm nobody, but It would be nice. So just putting it out there. But for those of you who watch this video, if you have any thoughts, you can drop them in the comment section. You can share it. That's one way to probably get it to the president and his wife or his family. And of course, there are also people in the Caribbean, the prime ministers of Caribbean nations, where they have a sizable enough Portuguese population could see this, and maybe they may think the same thing. Like, let me pick the phone up and call that guy over there in Portugal and see what he thinks about this. So you heard it here first, okay? All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I thank you, subscribers. My wife just came down the stairs a minute ago. I guess she didn't know I was doing this video, so I didn't call her in. I just decided to just do this off the top of my head. So thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Share this video. You can like, you can even dislike if you want to. I can't knock anyone for doing that. So just do what you must do to get this video out there, okay? I really appreciate it, and you guys take care until the next video. Bye-bye. Again, folks, so this is the other part of the last part of the video. So as I said before in that little introduction at the beginning, this is going to be the third part. Okay, let me get to it real quick. So some personal information that I found exciting. I hope you appreciate it and me sharing it with you guys. So I mentioned Maria de Jesus, and I mentioned she is my paternal great-great-grandmother. She came from the island of Madeira, and she immigrated to the island of St. Kitts, or at least that's where she ended up, on the island of St. Kitts. There she married a John de Guire Sr., a man who was from the island of St. Barthélemy, or we know it as St. Bart's today, which is right next door to St. Kitts. It's kind of a weird thing that she married a Frenchman, but that's a whole other story. But anyway, they had 2 children. The first child was born in 1876. The second child, my great-grandfather, was born in 1879. So looking for Maria de Jesus, I was trying to look through the Portuguese records, and of course there are a million people with that name. So I had no particular information that distinguishes her from all the other Maria de Jesuses. So, of course, when I was doing my genealogy search, people were like, you know what year she was born? And I'm like, I don't even have that. But what I did, I used some deductive reasoning. And I said, you know, back in those days, women got married at a relatively young age, and they had children at a relatively young age. So what I did with Maria de Jesus, I said, okay, her first child was born in 1876. So I said, you know what? Give and take that she had her first child around 18 to 21. So putting in an average right there, she was about 20 years old when her first child was born. So that would mean that she was born in 1856 if her first child was born in 1876. So I went with that, kept that in my mind, and just had it in my head. So while I was looking through the records, I tried to find, but of course there were more than one, and I'm looking through and I'm just like, okay, it's a little frustrating, hard to find any information because I didn't know what parish she came from in Madeira. I didn't know her father's name, her mother's name, none of that. So I took my DNA information, which I did through Ancestry.com, and I dropped it in GEDmatch. And when I did that, brought up all these names. So I started going through and I said, you know what? Let me do a search for De Jesuses in my list. When I did that, none came up for a De Jesus, but one person popped up as a Jesus, or Jesus. And I just took a wild, crazy shot, and I just decided, unfortunately, he has his email address there, but his email address is his name. And I happened to reach out to that name, I think on Facebook. I didn't remember I did so. And the person wrote back. Some weeks later, actually, wrote back. And when I looked at his profile, I happened to realize that he's from Funchal, and he was born in Funchal, and he lives there. I said, wow, I finally now have someone in Madeira who is actually connected to me. So once he reached out to me and I looked at GEDmatch and I saw his name, the fortunate thing about it, he had his family tree public. And I was just like, so while he was getting back to me and doing whatever, he hasn't quite gotten back to me as yet, but I decided to take it up on myself to start looking through his family tree. His family tree is beautiful and very organized, and looks like the family stayed intact, which made it easier for what I'm going to get to. So I looked and I saw his father and his father's children, his family tree. Then he had his grandfather and his grandfather's children. Then he had his great grandfather and his great grandfather's children. Then I think his great great grandfather, or was his great grandfather, but had the children there. So I looked and it was like, you know, I saw all of the surnames were De Jesus. I said, okay, they're all De Jesus, and this person is connected to me. So he's connected to me through that De Jesus name. So I started looking at all the children, going back at all the males in the family, you know, and I'm looking. So when I looked at his
Now, I saw this tweet and I'm just like, I don't think we do that.
I'm sorry about that. I think they're raccoons crawling around on my roof. Yeah. So I got to get back to that. That sounds a little scary there. But anyway, let me try to finish this and go take a look at that. So the next thing I know, I started looking at the names of the male figures and looking at their children. So when I looked at his grandfather, I looked at the names and I said, let me try to see if I can find this Maria de Jesus because he's connected to me and it's got to be through this name. So I looked at Maria de Jesus, and as I looked, I happened to notice that her name is not listed as one of his grandfather's children. Then I looked at his great grandfather. I looked down, I didn't see any names there either. But when I got to his great grandfather, I think it was Manuel Teixeira de Jesus, I looked down and I see a name. And the name was, one of his children was Maria Baptista Teixeira de Jesus. And when I look in parentheses, and I looked at her birth year, and I looked at her birthday, or her birth date, it was May 12th, 1856. Now, I don't know if that is my great-great-grandmother, but it's just strange that I guesstimated her birth year, and I said it was probably about 1856. And of all the names, as I'm looking through all these children going back, there are no other Maria de Jesus except for that one specific Maria de Jesus. Maria Baptista de Jesus, born in 1856. Again, I don't know if that is my great-great-grandmother, but just the fact that I'm connected to this person through DNA and then tracing his family tree going back, we happen to have a particular person in common, and at least a name, and we happen to have a particular person in common. So Maria, I don't know. I don't know who she gave birth to. I don't exactly know what happened. I don't know any other information beyond that. It just shows that she is a daughter of this person I'm connected to, his great-great-grandfather, and that was one of his children. And that's all that I saw. So I thought that was really fascinating. Now, to try to go ahead and find her information, it makes it a little bit difficult on the back end of this, because here's what it is. Now that I have that information, if I go into the Portuguese records to try to find that person, that's where it becomes somewhat difficult, because one of the things that happened back in those days, when people immigrated to the Caribbean islands from Madeira, they did not go directly to Antigua or to St. Kitts and Nevis. The British didn't do it that way. The British had two gateways to their Caribbean colonies, and it was primarily, well, three more or less. It was primarily Demerara, or Guyana as we call it today, Trinidad, or Barbados. So the Portuguese records, passport records, would show a Maria de Jesus going to a place like Demerara. But there won't be any secondary records that show she left Demerara and went to St. Kitts, or she left Barbados and she went to St. Kitts, or she left Trinidad and she went to St. Kitts. Perhaps it's out there. So I am not going to necessarily see a record that says Maria de Jesus left Madeira and went straight to St. Kitts. So she may have gone to Demerara, and that's what you're going to see, that she went to Demerara. But you're not going to see from Demerara she then moved on to St. Kitts. So that's what makes it so difficult right now to find out more information about her. So I don't know which one of those Maria de Jesuses that went to. For all I know, she may have gone to Brazil first. I don't know. And then from there moved on to St. Kitts. I really don't know. So that's where I'm somewhat stuck right now. But it was just fascinating to find that information out, looking through this gentleman's family tree. Again, looking at all of his I guess you would call them his great aunts and uncles and everything. There's only one Maria de Jesus, and she happens to be born the very same year that I estimated or I guesstimated that she would have been born, 1856. 20 years before she had her first child, if that is the Maria de Jesus I'm connected to. So I just wanted to mention that and point that out. So I'm still searching, still trying to find out, and hopefully I can get some information that will prove it conclusively that is my great-great-grandmother, Maria de Jesus. All right, that's all I wanted to say. So let me end it off here. This was another 10 minutes added to that video. So I hope you guys stuck around to watch this part also, okay? Again, comments, subscribe, share, be fantastic. Take care.